Let's go. That caught me off
It's a
guard there
go.
somehow. We did several like, all right, you ready? And I still no, I wasn't ready.
When that countdown starts, you got to really know what you're
No, I
doing.
know. No, you're right. You're right. You're right.
By the
And look, this is because this is Verse Take. If you're not aware, this is Verse Take, and it's season 2 and it's episode 3. So we ought to be, I mean, a well-oiled machine at this point. So my apologies to the audience. But and what are we doing? Who and yeah, what are we doing here?
We're here to talk poetry. We're here to talk Percy, Bysshe, Shelley.
Oh, yes, yeah, Bish.
And I've been saying Bysshe. It may be Bish, but I'm not quite sure.
Yeah,
I, I kind of heard it go both ways, but this is one of the premier romantics. This is a
yes.
guy who he has written poetry that has exceeded his years. He actually
Mm-hmm.
passed away
Mm-hmm.
young. We got another
Yep.
guy that kind of passed away young, but when you
Yep.
read some of his works, he kind of comes off
Mm-hmm.
as a guy that was much older.
Right, yeah. And of the major romantics, you think Keats, Byron, Wordsworth, Shelley. Wordsworth is the only one who lived like a full life.
Mm,
Byron dies at 36.
mm.
Shelley, 30. Keats, I think he was 26. I
Right.
want to
He
say or
was he
27. Yeah, something. Yeah, maybe 26. Yeah. So, three of those, and maybe that's why it's so romantic, right? Not
mm,
only are they talking about love and, sort of, classical, kind of, classical sort of concepts, ideas, they also kind of pass away young. And so we never get to see them kind of come full circle.
right. And a lot of these guys they seem to almost write beyond their years, and I wonder if that's because a lot of these guys were learned, they went to school and things like that, and they studied the classics, they studied the Greece, Rome, even Egypt. They studied some of these, the civilizations that came before, so maybe that informed them, maybe that caused them to kind of be able to write some of these epic poetry, this the great allusions to the classics that still stand up today. I mean,
Right.
to be, if you ask me, when people think of poetry, I imagine them. Oftentimes, I think they think of a lot of the romantics, even in style
Probably.
and form,
Hmm.
maybe more
Yeah.
so than name.
Yeah. Even if they're like sort of, kind of denigrating poetry, or like
Mm,
old poetry, or like if they're talking about not wanting things to be rhymed and all this kind of stuff, they're probably sort of have these kind of notions of the romantics,
mm,
whether they, and uh, also work that is abstract, because like with a lot of modernism, with Ezra Pound, like, go in fear of abstractions, the
mm,
image is the what is the ideal symbol, or
mm,
the object as it is. Um, so a lot of our poetry in America is almost in um, is in response to the Romantics still. Um,
right.
you know, and hey, who knows? Maybe they seem beyond their years because I don't know. Maybe we're not quite. I'm trying to think of a nice way of saying that we're a little dumber today than we than people were at the time, and so
Maybe,
we're
yeah,
like,
we could be
we're looking
past
at
our
these
peak.
guys and we're like, whoa,
Yeah.
how did these 20-year-olds write this stuff,
Maybe looking at it past the invention of radio, past the invention of television, and now into the digital age. Maybe we have been sort of dumbed down. Maybe these guys were sort of forced to entertain themselves by engaging with some of the classical works, and where entertainment is much cheaper these days, not only monetary wise, but in ease of access.
Yeah, certainly. No, I do wish that I think of how they talk about like a novella should be like able to be read in like one sitting or two.
Mm.
Think of like the time if you had to like just read 90 pages.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Where you're like, yeah, you got like 4 hours to kill. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, or, a couple hours. Like, what are you gonna do? You're just gonna go
right.
ahead and just read this book. That's why some of these longer poems, you don't see folks writing as long of poems.
Mm-mm.
And Shelley's got, I mean, I have this selected. Um, collection of his, and it's many poems that are that would be considered kind of long for today's standards.
Right.
But and unfortunately, I think some of his best stuff is a little bit longer, which makes it difficult for this podcast because we're not gonna spend an hour on a single poem. It would take us 20, 30 minutes just to read it,
Right.
but hey, that's what it is.
But hey, there's a silver lining to the cloud because then the audience can go delve into them themselves. And
That is true. That is true.
so we're just opening the door, giving you a
Mhm.
little taste.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
this is a guy that's worth it. I mean, I feel like I've been saying the same thing for the last few episodes. Like
Yeah, it's
these
worth
people
it.
are worth your time. It's worth
Right.
your time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, I don't want to get get the sled too far before the horse, but neither one of us did Ode to a Skylark,
Mm,
and that is other than maybe the poem that you did today, might be his most famous.
hmm.
If you think about skylarks, you think of Shelley. I don't know if everyone does that, but many people do, and that poem would be kind of long by today's standards. But another plug, I'll say Mont Blanc is a great one, and Alastor, or the Soul of Solitude. Um, Both fantastic longer poems that I would encourage people to go and you know s- in their free time look into.
Yeah. Hey. And it was worth your time. It was worth the effort. And he does have kind of more famous poems that aren't as long, but the romantics, you said, like, when people think of skylarks they think of Shelley.
Hmm.
Maybe when you think of romantic poetry you often think of birds, nature,
Hmm.
trees.
Yes.
These things sort of go
Right.
hand in hand. So um there's these are poets that find a beauty in the world, a
Hmm.
beauty in nature, and
Hmm.
even a strange beauty in the passage of time.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and something else, you're talking about kind of romantics, you think about nature, right? And Shelley and Byron are actually, kind of our later romantics, because the
Hmm.
early romantics we've done the other two. We've actually, well, we'll do Byron next week, but we'll have done all four of them. Wordsworth and Keats were the earlier romantics, and they were not political, whereas Shelley, a tinge with the later romantics is that they add a little bit of politics in there. Shelley did that an essay called "The Necessity of Atheism," that I think got him kicked out of school, or at least
Mm.
like it drew the ire of like officials at school.
Yeah, some people have
Um,
described Shelley as even a bit like radical, or as a bit like
hmm. Yeah.
one who'll rock the boat.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, and it's funny because I mean, and then also some people maybe today would consider him like a trust fund baby, or what's the other term that they use for
Privileged.
he privileged, certainly, yeah. He he didn't necessarily get anywhere with his poetry due to his name or his fame or anything like that, but he was able to live a bit more of a, say, maybe carefree life because of the um financial support of his father, the way that his father like supported his family in general.
Mm,
Even though he did get cut off from him at some one point, then he started funding him again.
mm. Yeah, there is a bit of a tension between somebody who is a learned person, or a person who's a member of, maybe not, I'm not going to say aristocracy, but maybe
Hmm.
they didn't have the term upper middle class back then, but someone whose family had some means, and
Hmm.
then the attitude of think things need to change, and a lot of
Hmm.
times the powerful, they're going to resist change. It behooves the powerful for things to stay the same, obviously. So we have a so like you said, the later romantics are getting a bit more political, a bit more.
Hmm.
They expect to see the world be affected by the things that they write, the things that they do, and some of the questions that they ask. It's interesting that Shelley's wife, Shelley was married to Mary Shelley, and
Hmm.
she wrote Frankenstein. So
Mhm.
there's whether it's Shelley's work, there's something
Mhm.
in Frankenstein. There's a little bit of like the powerful don't always know exactly what's best, or they might do things, bring things into the world that they regret or that they can't control. So there's the later romantics. When we get into the later romanticism, there is a critical lens placed on power structures.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and another interesting thing about Mary Shelley or Mary Wollstonecraft, Croft Shelley, her mother, what was her name? Wollstonecraft or Croft. She's a famous, basically feminist writer, wrote pamphlets like The Rights of Women, kind of modeled after, Thomas Paine's Rights of Man, because there's a whole thing that was going on in England at the time, kind of surrounding ideas of free speech. And her father was a famous writer as well. That's how Shelley got to meet her. Was he saw out her father, and blanking on his name, but he was someone that he looked up to. He was just kind of a controversial and well-read pamphleteer. An essayist, and so there. Funny enough, Shelley was actually married before her, but he lived kind of a very uh, maybe what's bohemian, maybe perhaps lifestyle.
Mm.
Very, he was very sort of liberal, laissez-faire, and yeah. Interesting enough, his first wife. I don't know if you read much about this or
I
came
don't know.
across
I don't
this
know
much.
about his first wife.
She drowned herself, actually.
Mm.
Um, Maybe perhaps because of the success that he later saw. But
Mm.
yeah, he was very free with his attention and affection.
Mm. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, very interesting stuff. So with
Hmm.
Bysshe Shelley, we got a young guy who has knowledge under his belt. He has knowledge of the classics under his belt, and he uses that in his poetry. But he's not one that's gonna uphold the power structure, even if people could argue that he has benefited from it.
Mm. Yeah.
So and people will say he's a bit of a radical. He rocked the
Hmm.
boat, and
Hmm.
he died young. So we got a guy who's got a real spark, and
Right.
so
Yep. Absolutely.
yeah. So
Well, with that, do you want to did you start last time?
I may have started last time. I think you can start this time.
Okay. Either way, either
All
way.
right. I'm gonna share the poem that Justin has selected.
Yes, so I chose a poem. This is a well-known poem from him called "Lines to a Critic," and isn't that now in mine? I'm just gonna say there's no numbers here, but
Mm.
I do think how thoughtful of the person on this website to number the stanzas.
There were four of them, so
Hey, you don't want to lose track. All right, so lines to a critic. Honey from silkworms who can gather, or silk from the yellow bee? The grass may grow in winter weather as soon as hate in me. Hate men who can't, and men who pray, and men who rail like thee. An equal passion to repay they are not coy like me. Or seek some slave of power and gold to be thy dear heart's mate. Thy love will move that bigot cold sooner than me I hate. A passion like the one I prove cannot divided be. I hate thy want of truth and love. How should I then hate thee? So this is a, this is a well-known poem, as I said, lines to a critic, and one sort of, I guess, tool in the writer's tool belt that Shelley uses here that I really like is the use of inversion.
mm,
Poem kind of relies on use of inversion, and obviously overall why I like this poem, this is kind of like this is to my haters, you know
exactly.
and so I appreciate that, right? Because sometimes we think like, oh, music today, it's all about the haters, or something like that, like how sort of shallow. And then you say, well, I mean, hey, Shelley's got a poem called Lines to a Critic, and he's got
Mm-hmm.
a lot about sex and women. I don't know. I don't know what that says, but so the use of inversion, it really, obviously, it's most obvious here in this first line, but it's also called anastrophe, where kind of for sort of poetic effect, he's kind of changing the word order of the sentences, right? So, honey from silkworms, who can gather, right? Not who can gather honey from silkworms, right? It adds a little poetic effect, right? Honey from silkworms, who can gather, or silk from the yellow bee. The grass may grow in winter weather as soon as hate in me. Um, I think there's that little bit there just adds a little bit of interest. I think it actually makes it more interesting and makes you kind of wonder, try and grasp, okay, what are we saying here? You know?
Mm-hmm. It's almost we're
Yeah.
almost like establishing the rules in the first
Mm,
stanza.
mm,
You know, we're
mm-hmm,
we're kind
mm-hmm.
of where these are almost first principles, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. It's a little bit, and again, here's some romantic qualities of it. We're talking about things in nature, right? We're relating human, um, sort of human behavior to nature, what we find in nature. Um, so, like honey from silkworms, obviously, that doesn't come from silkworms. Silk doesn't come from the yellow bee, right? And just as grass does not grow in winter weather, hate will not come from me.
I'm not a
Right.
hater.
Right. Yeah. You're not gonna. Hey, you're barking up the wrong tree.
Right.
Sorry about it. So that these are lines to a critic, and this actually came from him being in. There's one critic in particular that people say that this is where this poem comes from, but say it came from many, or whoever. He's actually responding, to somebody. He says, hate men who can't, and men who pray, and men who rail like thee. um at first I was like, huh, I had to look up can't, the definition of can't, to see, like,
Mm.
this is used a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with this, but apparently can't,
Can
that
mean
can't,
sing.
well, yeah, that would be like a cantos, yeah, like
Mm.
Italian. This can't is speaking hypocritically,
Okay.
is
Okay.
what it means.
Okay.
When someone speaks hypocritically.
Okay.
So
Okay.
hate, yeah, hate men who can't, hate men who pray, and pray being used in the old sense of to entreat. You know,
Okay.
so like people, like, pray tell me, you know, uh,
Right.
you
Right.
so used to entreat, because that's what we do, entreat the Lord, right?
Mm.
And so, and men who rail like thee, also railing, um in this sense comes from the it comes from the old French. um it's basically like to complain.
Right. Yeah. To rail against.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, basically to complain. So it's like, hey, hate men who are hypocritical, hate men who, beg, hate men who, complain. Um, an equal passion, this is still inverted, an equal passion to repay. They are not coy like me. They will actually, they'll give you what you want.
They'll go back and forth with you.
Right, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you want some back and forth, talk to the men who can't pray and rail, you know. And
Okay.
all
Okay.
that, uh Shelley saying, I don't do those things, right? Right?
Okay. Right. Right.
you know, uh, because he, and obviously he's saying, he's being coy. He's like, oh, I won't quite go there with you, but
Mm-hmm.
they'll do it in equal passion.
Right.
Um, Sorry, I'm just jumping right into this. I kind of realized that, and I was just like, I'm just gonna keep running with it.
Go for it.
Um, or seek some slave of power and gold to be thy heart there, to be thy dear heart's mate. Thy love will move that bigot cold sooner than me, thy hate. Um,
Mm.
you know, um, he's kind of, he's tying up the critic, like almost like, I don't know, does the
He's
critic do
saying
this
like
for
go,
money?
yeah, go look for someone like a. I take it as almost like go look for an artist who's all about the money
Yeah,
to
yeah, that, yeah.
like try to be like he's wrong about my poetry.
Mhm,
My
mhm.
poetry's good. My
Yeah,
poetry's
yep.
almost as a way to defend themselves to their readership.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, because 'cause they're a slave of power and gold, so it's gotta be
Hmm.
right, it's gotta be, or
Our people have
whatever.
to. I have to be adored. I have to
Mhm,
be.
mhm,
I have to be looked at as great, and to be thy dear heart's mate. So that's who your mate is.
mhm,
Your mate is the artist that is swayed by this
mhm.
criticism.
Right, 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 yeah. Again, he's kind of saying, "You're sort of barking up the wrong tree."
Right.
That's not me,
Right.
um he and he's saying that hate, now he calls it love. Thy love will move that bigot cold sooner than me thy hate. you know
Mm.
because there's almost, I almost read it as he's saying, um what to me is hate for them will be love,
Right.
and they
Because
will,
they're
yeah,
because as a slave of power and gold, your attention is somehow
feeding that,
bolstering them, or
yes.
somehow edifying them.
Mhm, mhm, yeah. Right, and you'll move, and it, again, just like in the first stanza where he says, "The grass may grow in winter weather." I feel like that's kind of that's almost like a mirror of this line, "Thy love will move that bigot cold." Sort of those, I don't know,
Hmm.
those kind of opposites where, um, yeah, it's sort of
Yeah,
like an
like
opposite there.
it's like your love will cause that bigot to it'll move him cold, maybe cause him to like you know be angry with you, or to be like, oh, I hate this critic, he's wrong, and things like that. But
Yeah, or yeah.
the fact is, you've moved him, you've had an effect on him.
Mhm,
And this
mhm.
is almost he's calling him a bigot. He's almost like framing him as like a lesser artist, or someone who's Shelley's almost framing himself as the true artist,
Right.
unmoved by
Mhm. Yeah.
let as if his art, and that this is not in the text, but it's as
Mhm.
if his art will speak for itself.
Mhm. Mhm.
He doesn't
Right.
have to sort of defend himself.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and then you could almost kind of say, like, the poem itself sort of contradicts all of that, but at the same time,
Mm,
hey, he kind of ends with this, a passion like the one I prove, like he's proved the passion like the one I prove, the one I have, that I've shown proof of, like this passion, a passion like the one I prove cannot divided be. I hate thy want of truth and love. How should I then hate thee? Now Shelley is sort of taking the high road, and like, he's like, he's so above it. He goes, how should I hate you? It's like people who are sort of self-righteous and religious and say, I'm angry with your sin. I hate your sin. It's not, it's sort of, I
mm-hmm.
love you, but I hate your sin. I don't know
Right.
if anyone's ever heard that, but I have. And so, a passion, and so that's what Shelley's now doing, saying, I hate thy want of truth and love. He is now, he's in this place where he's saying, hey, you critic, you are wanting, so that means you lack truth and love. How should I then hate thee?
Right.
Because, Shelley, he's full of truth and love. So of course he loves the critic just the same, but he just hates what he's doing.
Mm. And I mean, a passion like the one I prove. It's as if the preceding three stanzas have proven he's proven
Yes.
himself.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
look at the artistry of these stanzas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. It's like a
Some
mathematical
guy
proof.
right, yeah, it almost reminds me of the Muhammad Ali, the boxer, used to say
Yes.
things like I've proved, like he would look at his fights as
Yes.
proof that he was the scholar of boxing, or he even at
Mm-hmm.
one time
Or
said
that.
that
Yes.
he's proven that Allah was God by
Right.
defeating George
Yes.
Foreman.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, you see things like that in the Old Testament too, where they kind of prove, like, David slaying Goliath, right?
Mm-hmm.
Proof that God, that's proof of God. So I agree with you. Yeah, I think the first three stanzas he is proving that passion.
Right? And he says like a passion like the one I prove cannot divided be. Like this passion, this proof, there's almost something divine about it.
Right. Yeah, it's whole. It's
Right.
yeah, because
It's
truth is not divided.
right. So because you are without truth and love, you're almost like not worthy of hatred.
Mm-hmm.
You're a
Mm-hmm.
sad little
Mm-hmm.
man.
Right. You're right.
You
I
know.
hate that you are lacking those things.
Right.
That's what bothers me. It bothers me most that you lack truth and love. Because I mean, believe me, I would be thrilled if you had it.
Right. I would be thrilled and you would be thrilled,
Right. Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
you wouldn't have to
Mm-hmm.
go around searching for some artist to go back and forth with you.
Right.
I can
Yeah.
hear Shelley saying, I'm not going back and forth with these yahoos. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Let me write this poem real quick.
Right. In a way, like, the poem, like you said like a mathematical proof. It's almost, even though it is lines to a critic, it
Mm-hmm.
almost, he didn't name the critic, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Right. That is true.
But no, it is, there's a bit of a tension there. You wrote these lines, as beautiful as they are, as biting as they are, you were still compared to write.
Right.
Still
Yep.
compelled to write.
Compelled to write. Right. Correct. Which I mean, you could say the art of his response sort of carried it, right? Because I
Mm.
mean, we don't know what the criticism of Shelley was at the time. It's
We
interesting,
Yeah, we
but
don't. We don't.
it's interesting, but we don't. I mean, in large part, we don't care less about that than we care about Shelley.
Right.
And you
And
could say we
you
don't care
mentioned
about him enough. Yeah.
something about the critic that this was allegedly to. Did you read anything about what could have prompted this, or
No, no.
well,
I know that there's a story, and
mm,
but I didn't dive into it.
well, hey, that gives the audience an opportunity to go dive
There you
into it.
go. Yeah. Yep. Fill my gap
Yeah, so
or something.
hey, I was gonna let that slide. I wasn't gonna say
That was
anything.
like like a hole in the market, like a gap in the market. You
Right.
fill that, right?
I love how that or something was so quiet.
Yeah,
But
something like that.
yeah, or something.
Right? Yeah.
But yeah, man, this is
Mm.
I like the poem. It's
Yeah.
one of those.
Yeah. It's fun.
It's one of those. And there's no name for it, but there almost should be 4 lines, 4 stanzas. It's almost
Right.
like a,
Hmm.
I don't know. There's something set
I
with
know.
that.
I know. I mean, it's not exactly a ballad. I
Four
think
quatrains.
right. People just say I don't know lyric poetry.
Yeah, yeah. All right.
But
So,
yeah.
I'm actually going to do a poem by Shelley's. The poem's called Ozymandias, and this is one of his. This is a. I really like this poem. I remember. I think I read this poem in maybe like eighth or ninth grade or something. I've always liked it. I've always thought it was a great poem. And but before I get into it, I will say, like, one of the interesting things about, as Justin mentioned, the later romantics, they do have a bit of a political tinge to them, but also during the time when they were writing, e- Egyptomania was very prominent, in the those early 1800s. It prompted by Napoleon going to Egypt and bringing a lot of that Egyptian stuff back to Europe. There was an explosion of interest and intrigue concerning Egypt in, the earlier part of the 19th century. And so this poem was prompted by, this poem, it actually has a younger sibling. There's another poem called Ozymandias. It's by Horace Smith. It's titled the same. It's also a sonnet. The rhyme scheme's a little different, and this rhyme scheme is different than a Petrarchan sonnet, but the rhyme scheme for this poem's little brother is even different than this. And Percy. Bysshe, Shelley, and Horace Smith, they often do what Justin and I've done. We write poems, maybe sometimes on the same topic, sometimes different topics, and sort of compare and contrast. So get find a friend to write with. Lend a pen to a
Yeah.
friend to write with them. You know
Mm,
what I mean?
mhm, mhm.
You never know what you'll uncover.
Right.
But so in the early 1800s, we got poetic friends, we have Egyptomania, and so that's where this poem comes from. And without further ado, I shall read Ozymandias by Percy Bysshe Shelley or Shelley. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear: My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." So that is Ozymandias by Percy Shelley. And any first impressions, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, this is one, um, I don't know when I first read this one. Could have been middle school, could have been high school. But it's just one of those ones that, it's kind of always stuck out to me over the years. I love this poem. I love the way that it ends. It's kind of a little bit of a gut punch.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this is a great sort of foreshadow to American sonnets, because it's a sonnet, but it's like almost subtly a sonnet.
Mm.
It's not just say, hey, I'm a sonnet, hey,
Right,
I'm a
right.
sonnet here, look, check this sonnet out. um and so I love that about it. But yeah, and then also, we've briefly touched on the politics of it. I mean, it's not overtly political, but it sort of says something about, I guess, maybe the futility of man, and how
The
all
passing of time,
the passing of time, the fight for power, um
the passing
and
of the torch from one sort of
mhm.
one empire to the next. and
Yeah.
this and this was written after sort of the fall of Napoleon. So we
Mm,
have
mm,
Napoleon, the this great figure, this son of Europe, that
mhm,
brought all this information and artifacts back from Egypt
mhm,
into Europe, stimulating the European imagination. And but then Napoleon does have his fall. So now we have all this these we see Egypt's known for its kings. And
mhm,
Egypt is a place where, like, Ramesses the first will have an obelisk, and then immediately in front of that there'll be a bigger obelisk by Ramses the
mhm,
second. So
mhm.
a lot of times people will be like, oh, maybe you should respect your father's obelisk. But to the Egyptians, they were always trying to outdo each other. I move more stone than my father. I have bigger works than my father. I'm the king of kings. I'm the god on earth.
Right.
So so we have a critique of that sort of mindset. And also interesting, the Brit, even though Napoleon's empire is sort of falling, the British Empire is starting to pick up and starting to make moves. So and I'm not trying to say that Shelley necessarily knew that or saw that, but the torch of great powers passes. It constantly passes, and this poem definitely articulates that.
Mhm. Yeah, also that, even though, he wrote that essay, The Necessity of Atheism, it sort of expresses the idea that, the plans of, mice and men, kind of fall back to dust. Yeah, that's a rough paraphrase, but, um kind of again going, kind of going back to the futility of man. You can attain this great power. You can, have all these mighty works. and what you'll but what can you actually determine what'll get passed on? I mean, you can't. It's
Right.
sort of this lack of control that we have. Because the desert sort of takes it all back, in a way.
Mm,
Um, or just like how like the jungle reclaim everything.
right.
Essentially the world has sort of reclaimed this sort of effort made by man, and it all comes to naught. And so I love this. I love how this poem just illustrates that and kind of
Right.
kind of brings that home. It's almost a little bit of a parable.
Mm. And to get into some line analysis, I met a traveler from an antique land. The land is antique.
Hmm.
And we don't know this from. I don't. We're not sure. Is this a person from Egypt, or is this just a person that is a traveler that has come from Egypt? You know what I mean? That has
Hmm.
traveled from Egypt. We're not sure, but the a lot of this poem is something that the traveler is telling the narrator. I mean, we start with the I, but we quickly leave the I behind and kind of go into like this story that the that this traveler is telling the narrator. Two vast and trunkless legs of stone. And to me, I find that very interesting that there's two great legs still standing there without a body.
Hmm.
It's almost like the leg, and it kind of reminds me how, and we have the word colossal in the second to last line. It kind of reminds me of the Colossus of Rhodes, how the
Yeah.
Colossus of Rhodes strided across the harbor, you
Hmm.
know.
Yep.
And so these
Right.
these vast and trunkless legs, it almost illustrates the reach of empire, how
Hmm.
empires can have this long reach, but the body has crumbled. So the reach of Egypt, like, are the stride of Egypt, shall we say, is there. The stride of Egypt has made it to the narrator, has made it to the poet, yet the body has crumbled away. The body, the trunkless is the trunk is gone. The only things we have left are the two legs and the shattered visage, um the face. We have the legs and we have the face. And the face is this frowning, you know uh wrinkled lips, sneer of cold command. You can tell this is the face of a someone who's maybe tyrannical, maybe focused on themselves, a king of kings, you know
Right.
um
Yeah, he's not looking on you with like love or compassion.
right. And this quote is actually a remix of a quote from there's a historian traveler named Diodorus, who, and I actually have that quote. Diodorus alleges that and Ozymandias is Ramses II. That on a statue of Ramses II, the inscription says, "King of kings am I, Ozymandias. If anyone would know how great I am and where I lie, let him surpass one of my works." So
Mm.
that's the historical uh quote. But Shelley kind of remixes it a little bit, like, you know not because Ramses almost invites others, like, if you're such a great king, if you're such a great ruler, see if you can have works that are as great as mine. But the Ramsey Shelley presents us with says he presents his works as the end all be all. Like, this
Right.
is it.
Hmm.
This is, look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. And I love that. I always love the movement we get in poetry. Look on my works, ye mighty. We have this exaltation, ye mighty, and despair, this falling down. We have this vertical axis right before we get the horizontal axis. Nothing besides remains. So we have these mighty kings of kings with these mighty words, yet this colossal wreck has decayed. It has gone to naught. And I kind of take it as a little bit of a double meaning. Shelley's Ramses is saying, my works are the end all be all. My works represent a limit of humanity. Look on them and despair. But if there was a powerful person reading this, or if there was a powerful person who could look at this visage, or some person who had aspirations, tyrannical aspirations, they may despair because they may see that, wow, this great King Ramses who did all these works, nothing besides him remains. There's almost a despair that time will continue to pass. No matter how powerful you are, no matter how much you accomplish, it'll all be rendered, to naught.
Yeah, absolutely. I, d- I find it interesting too with them just having the legs there. It's like almost like the foundation, you know.
Mm,
Um, Even though you would think the foundation would be a good thing, to have like some foundation, but it's like the just the feet, or like it's more than just the feet. It's just like these legs, without a body, as you were saying, and then you kind of just have the visage, but like this sort of, um, just like the surface level, face, this surface
mm.
level part of it, and then this sort of empty foundation, you know, and that is almost like, that is sort of like
What is left of great empires?
of the empire or even the man, in a
Mm,
way. Um, because you talk about like King, Ramses. Um, I don't know. I find that interesting. I feel like that just says something about maybe maybe even the soul of the person. Um, I can't
mm.
quite put my finger on it, but maybe I can just point to it. Um, but I
You
I
know,
love this poem. I think it's, yeah.
and there's something else I found interesting was the King of Kings capitalized both of those,
Mm-hmm.
and then works is capitalized and
Yes.
mighty.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
King of Kings, look on
Mm-hmm.
my works, ye mighty.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The capitalization of the word mighty, almost to me that almost says like there are other gods out there. There are other kings out there. There are other great people of greatness out there that are worth sort of, they're worth a capital letter, but despair,
Mm-hmm.
ultimately despair. Because
Right.
my works are also it's almost like the works of God. He's almost the declaration. We have a juxtaposition here between Ozymandias's words, like, I'm a god, I'm a king of kings, I'm sort of beyond even the mighty of this world, juxtaposed with nothing beside remains. um
That is interesting. It kind of actually reminds me of a short poem I almost chose by Shelley, because you think what is left over and what is not. Now, material things are not left over, but the spirit of Ozymandias in this is left over. The words
mm,
that he spoke, but not his, but not his, but his works are actually not.
right.
So you wonder, like, what does move on? Um, Yeah. So here, real quick, just I won't read this whole thing, but rose leaves when the rose is dead are heaped for the beloved's bed, and so thy thoughts when thou art gone, love itself shall slumber on. He's talking about like what kind of is left behind. It's more
Mm,
the thoughts, it's the sound, it's the senses rather than anything sort of physical. You know, it's not the
mm.
rose leaves, it's not the works, but it is the words of Ozymandias that we're left with.
That's interesting. What was the name of that poem?
That one is two, and it is, then in parentheses it says music.
Okay.
Music when soft voices die.
Okay.
Oh, there we go for our audience there. If you can actually read that, probably not.
And the last sentence, it you almost said it almost is a gut punch. The lone and level sands stretch far away. Sands is a it's a plural noun. I mean, sands, it has an S on it, but I like how the sands are lone. The sands are by themselves. I wonder if it's almost like waiting for the next person to sort of command them and take them over, like, but to kind of rebuild that hierarchy, to reintroduce that hierarchy. But for now, the lone and level sands stretch far away. To me, that almost seems like not only Ozymandias' time has long passed, but the lone and level sands almost it almost begs for attention and hierarchy. It almost begs for someone to pay attention to it and kind of rebuild that hierarchy.
Yeah, it's almost a little bit like the void or the matrix.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of, yeah, it's sort of awaiting.
It reminds me of Bukowski, the sun's standing
Mm,
there awaiting the next chapter.
yes, yeah, that is a good one. Yeah, in
Yeah.
Dinosaurio,
Right, right.
the end of that. Um, and there's some parallels here between, sort of the spirit.
Mm. Yeah, Dinosauria, and this is about time passing, an age ending, and evidence that an age has ended.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you have the words left of Ozymandias, and then you also have the wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command.
Mhm.
So you can kind of again you sort of get the spirit. There's a feeling that you can get from him, and that's really all that gets passed on.
Right. The intangible, even though he was
Mm-hmm.
focused so much on, the
Right.
Egyptians, they focused so
Yes.
much on stone, moving the
Mm-hmm.
stone.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
sort of why the Egyptians are contrasted with water in the Old
Mm-hmm.
Testament.
Mm-hmm.
But another thing just that I found interesting, we have the word mocked here in this stanza.
Mm-hmm.
The hand
Mm-hmm.
that mocked them
Right.
and the heart that fed. Mock
Mm-hmm.
is one of those words that can mean to kind of gather together, but it
Mm-hmm.
can also mean to sort of tear down, to mock. To
Mm-hmm.
mock
Mm-hmm.
something can be to
Mm-hmm.
tear it down, but
Right.
then to mock something, to you can also mock together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's
Right. Yeah, there is kind of two.
the hand that mocked, that mocked is almost like, Shelley's almost nodding to the sculptor.
Right. Yeah. The sculptor. It's almost like the sculptor knew what he was doing when he gave him a wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command.
Right.
Yeah, mocking him. Kind of also like when you sort of mimic. It's not the same, but he
Hmm.
kind of, um, like, what are you mocking me right now? I'm like, no, I'm just saying what you said. you know.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
And
Yeah.
the also the which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. That kind of juxtaposition, yet survive, lifeless things.
Mm,
The sculptor what read the passions which yet survive, but they're stamped on lifeless things. So
right. Yeah.
there's a kind of a duality, like, of power,
Mhm.
fecklessness, you know.
Right. Which again, kind of this intangible, tangible thing, like, the intangible passion is what is sort of that's what's been stamped onto these, um, to these lifeless things,
Hmm.
that we can read into are the passions. Maybe not necessarily what, Ozymandias or Ramses wanted us to see, but
Right.
it's, that's what's
That's
coming
what
through.
has that's what remains.
Right.
Right.
Right, is the effect that he had on the sculptor. Because if the sculptor maybe loved him, he might have made him look a little different.
Maybe. But yeah, I mean, this is a great. I mean, not to beleaguer the point, but we also have wreck here capitalized. this is one of those poems you could keep going and going.
Right.
I mean, you could just keep going and
That's
going.
what, yeah, that's something that like romantics, we don't do that as much anymore. Sort of capitalize like this is the King of Kings. He's talking about
Right.
the mighty, like
Mm-hmm.
making it the pronoun. These are, on my, works,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, no, that's a great one. And hey, you know what? There's a reason why that poem has stood the test of time, much like those trunkless legs.
Right. Much like those trunkless legs. Mm,
So, yeah, no, I mean, hey, that's one I've gone back to many times over the years. So that's
right.
I think
Now
that is a
that's one of my good ones. That's a great
yeah,
one
yeah. So I think for anyone who's unfamiliar with Shelley, like, hey, that's a good place to start.
for sure.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, hey, what are your final thoughts on Shelley here?
My final thoughts on Shelley is this was a young guy with spunk that's worth your time reading, even if it's
Yeah,
200 years ago. I
right.
think
Yeah.
you'll be able to find, if you're young out there, you have a tenacity,
Mm-hmm.
you might be able to
Mm-hmm.
find something in them. You'll be able to find something in all romantic poetry, I
Mm-hmm.
think. I
Yeah.
Because that's the poetry that I gravitated to the most in my youth when especially in school, immediately after school.
Yeah.
So I've always enjoyed it. Hey, it's worth your time. It is accessible. That's another thing about romantic poetry. It is accessible.
Right.
It's not going to be like the Wasteland.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It might be a bit lengthy. You might want to
Mm-hmm.
stop and kind of
Mm-hmm.
read, and you may have to
Yeah.
look up some words here and there.
Right.
But
Right. Right.
no,
Right.
the romantics write for people to read.
Mm-hmm.
So some of
Mm-hmm.
them write for you to sing.
No, I was gonna say I think it's worthwhile to read it out loud,
Mm,
because you think of these guys essentially had like open mic nights. And they were, this is stuff that would be read aloud. It's meant to be read aloud. To get the full effect, like you ought to read it aloud. Um, but yeah, I think the romantics appeal to young people today because of the lives they lived, and but they also appeal to older people because their poetry is a bit more conservative in some ways.
mm-hmm.
Um, their poetry isn't conservative, but I mean in the sense that
Well,
you're gonna have.
conservative in the sense of form.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Not necessarily in content, but we're much more liberal as of a society today, where some things aren't shocking to us
Right.
any longer. But yeah, the lives these guys lived, young people cannot kind of emulate. They're young, kind of rock stars in some ways, or vagabonds.
Mm,
Um, and then yeah, so I mean, hey, don't take it for face value. You look at it and you say, "Oh, these are just like some old dead guys, nothing exciting, like they're kind of sort of scandalous in their own right." Um, you can kind of, it's a little rebellious.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, that's all I've got really got. It's worth
That's
it.
all I have. That's me
I
doing my best Nicki Minaj there at the.
uh, Poetry's worth it. That's
Hey,
all I'd say.
it's worth it. All right, kids. No, so hey, we got Shelly. I alluded to it earlier. We're doing Byron next week.
Okay.
And we're gonna get out of these romantics here, but it's kind of nice after doing like Mary Oliver last week. We
Mm-hmm.
talk about some of these people being sort of romantics. Then you get down to the nitty-gritty of it, but yeah, hey, like, subscribe, share with a friend. Watch it at work. Um, you
And we are
know,
not the authority. If you
right,
disagree, if you want a counterpoint, if you feel that you have better points, get down
right.
there, get in the comments.
hmm Hey, I
You
say
know.
look at our works and despair if you disagree. Yeah.
But
But yeah, yeah. Join the conversation, and yeah, I'm Justin,
I'm James.
and this has been Verse Take.
We are signing off. We'll see you guys later.